Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon or this evening, I guess, depending on what time zone you're in. We have a great lineup of guests ready to chat with you all. Um, but without further ado, let me just go ahead and give a quick introduction to our event. This is a 2025 Black Birders Week event, and we are here to celebrate Black joy, curiosity, and leadership in the world of birding and nature. Whether you're a seasoned birder or a budding naturalist or just here to learn, we're really thrilled to have you with us. Black Birders Week was created to amplify Black voices in birding, challenge stereotypes about who belongs in nature, and foster a community where Black birders feel seen, supported, and inspired. We envision a future where the outdoors is truly for everyone, where Black birders can explore, study, and enjoy nature without fears or barriers. This event is for Black birders, scientists, hikers, and nature lovers of all ages and experience levels. But it's also for allies who want to learn, uplift, and help create more inclusive spaces in conservation and outdoor recreation. For too long, Black communities have faced systematic exclusion from outdoor spaces, whether through lack of representation or safety concerns or limited access to resources. Building trust means actively working to dismantle those barriers. It means creating opportunities, sharing knowledge, and ensuring Black birders know they belong in this community. This week is more than just birds. It's about reclaiming our connection to nature, celebrating our contributions, and inspiring the next generation. So let's learn, explore, and soar together. I have one more message from our sponsors at Wild Birds Unlimited. We are incredibly grateful to our sponsors, Wild Bird Unlimited, for their continued support of Black Birders Week this year. Their dedication to fostering inclusivity and celebrating Black birders, naturalists, and conservationists helps make this event possible. Thank you for championing diversity in the outdoors and empowering our community to connect with nature. We deeply appreciate your partnership and commitment to making the birding world more welcoming for all. All right, thank you all for being here. Now let's go ahead and kick things off with cultivating belonging in your yard. I'm one of your co-hosts, Danielle Bellany, but I will not be up front for much longer. I'm going to hand this thing off to Bria Mingwa, our main moderator for this event, and then I'll pop back in during the question and answer session towards the end of our event. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and hand things over to Bri.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Really appreciate you getting us all set up and going. I am joined by an awesome crew of folks tonight. If we haven't met or virtually met before, my name is Brianna Amingwa. I also go by Bree, and I am today rocking this year's Black Birders Week shirt filled with some awesome sparrows and designed by another Black birder who we can tag in the chat here. We are super happy to have you all joining us tonight. I am joining you from Maryland. I live not too far from Baltimore, and I have spent tons of time in my own backyard birding and creating a habitat for birds. So I'm happy to be joined by this really, I'm going to call them illustrious crew of folks who are experts in this and can share their expertise with you. We welcome your questions. If you want to leave those in the comments, that's fine. We'll also have about 5 or 10 minutes at the end to take any questions. But if you leave them in the comments, I can keep track of them there too. So I want to introduce our folks who are joining us. A little bit about myself. My name is Brianna. Like I said, I am the founder of Deeply Rooted Outdoor Education. I am a longtime veteran park ranger working on national wildlife refuges, and I've recently started my own business doing environmental education consulting and education for communities. So I am happy to be birding here and joining you all. I have been birding since about the year 2012 and have seen tons of birds in my lifetime, and I'm happy to have a chance to talk about it. So I have Danielle kind of reshuffle the deck here and bring up our panelists. And I'd like to start off by introducing, since you're on screen, Tati Soto-Bartzi. She's here with us from the West Coast. And Tati is a birder and a botanist from California whose love for birding began 5 years ago. She's one of the COVID birder babies that so many of us are and joined into bird watching at that time. Birds and plants are deeply intertwined with foraging, nesting, and survival. And Tati feels like those native plants play a huge role in the relationship. and she's combined her two passions to enhance her yard and attract birds by planting a variety of native plant species. So welcome, Tati.
Thank you.
And next up, I'd like to introduce you to who's coming on screen next. Danielle, who's it going to be? Will. All right, Will Valentine. It's kind of like a game show. You guys just pop up here. So Will is a proud bird brain, an avid birder, an amateur naturalist, and a lifelong lover of learning our natural world. Unfortunately, Will was not exposed to the wonderful world of birding a long time ago. It wasn't until he was an adult that he got into birding. And after feeling a little bit robbed of that opportunity, he is jumping in headfirst and engaging with all kinds of activities like birding. Will has made it his personal mission to introduce the hobby of birding to as many people as possible in his effort to educate, inspire, and advocate for the birds. He works towards this mission via an education-based podcast. It's all about the common birds of North America. It has really informative social media posts. And on that podcast, he shares his love and knowledge of birds with anybody who will listen. So thanks, Will. Hey there. Oh, Will's having a little connectivity tweak. Will, are you with us? Oh, I think your mic might be muted. He can come back for you, Will. I'll roll on to Brandy. There you are. Awesome. Thanks, Will. I'll go over to Brandy Cannon-Force. So Brandy Cannon-Force uses she, they pronouns, and Brandy is a fourth-year PhD candidate at Stanford Graduate School of Education. They focus on science education and are influenced by their previous experience as a botanist, as well as their time teaching middle school science. They were born and raised in Houston, Texas, with Beyonce, right? But have spent time living in New York and now the Bay Area, and referring to all those three as home now. Brandy has a big interest in how Black educators and students embody the tenets of Afrofuturism, how it helps them to dream, to create inclusive and diverse curriculum in K-12 spaces for science. So beyond grad school, Brandy is an avid gardener, amateur chocolatier, and a mother to her two adorable but very devious cats. Hi, Brandy.
Hello.
Nice to see you this evening.
Great to be here.
So we will be joined by one more panelist, hoping she can make it. Her name is Lindy Shu, but oh, there she is. Hi, Lindy.
Hello.
So glad to see you. I'm going to just do your quick intro, and then we'll jump into the questions, okay? So many years ago, Lindy took an interest in birding when she saw an empty and weed-filled lot. The lot was filled with crows that were just walking and hanging around. And she wondered, what are these crows doing, right? Since then, she's become a little bit bird obsessed. By profession, Lindy is actually a physicist and a science writer. She's written for publications like the New York Times and Scientific American, usually on physics or math. So really happy to have you in the room tonight, Lindy, to share with us your experience in getting into birding and kind of taking on this interest. And I'm happy to see you. Are you in your yard right now?
I am. I just thought it would be useful to show my backyard. So I'm on my phone holding it up. It's a little tiring, but that's okay.
That works for us. So since you are right there already, how about we start with your intro? Can you tell us a little bit, Lindy, about why you do this, what got you started, and maybe if you have a favorite species that you like to grow or cultivate?
Yeah, so my gardening, backyard gardening, basically had two phases. It kind of started when we were living in an apartment, and I had a little porch yard, and it graduated when we finally got a house. And I really wanted to try to recreate the forest in my backyard as much as possible, because I guess I feel like grass with like flowers, in a neat line was kind of boring. And I really loved the look of the forest and how peaceful it was. So basically just not to have a boring backyard, I got into just kind of trying to have as many native plants and stuff like that as possible.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite in your yard, Lindy?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have a couple of strawberry trees in our yard, and they've grown to be huge. Like they were very small trees when we, started them out, and they're taller than the house now. I think they're also called California manzanite. Um, but they make fruit that you can actually eat. You can't get it at the grocery store because it's kind of fragile, but it tastes a little bit like mango. And yeah, and it's nice and shady, and the birds love it. So that's probably my favorite backyard species. But I also really like pine trees too.
I love it. You don't need like the exclusive farm to table restaurants. Like you have it right in your backyard growing.
Right.
Awesome. How about over to Will? Will, would you tell us a little bit about why you do this and any of your favorites?
Yeah, so like you kind of said in my intro, just love learning, and birding's kind of the ultimate hobby for that. I feel like when I first started, I thought it would be pretty simple to identify birds. Like there's the boy and the girl version, right? But how wrong I was, because males and females look different, but then there's also the different types of plumages throughout the year. And then I realized the songs, like just the sounds that they make, it's so layered. So it's like this infinitely growing hobby. But that's kind of one thing I love about it. The other thing is you don't need to travel to exotic places to have fun with birding. Like when I first started, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to go to like Antarctica to see penguins or go somewhere hot to see flamingos and cool birds. But I realized you can put up your own backyard. And that's kind of what keeps it like endlessly exciting for me as well, which goes into my favorite species to attract, which would be the black-capped chickadee. It's kind of one of those species that's close to my heart because it's one of the first birds that I learned how to identify via its song or the calls that it makes. I have struggled with identifying birds by ear. And that one was kind of like a confidence boost. Like, okay, I'm looking at this little guy. He's taking the sunflower seeds from my feeder and he's doing the calls and the songs. It's like sticking in my head. So I feel like a connection every time I see one. It's like a little confidence boost. Like I know I can do it with you and any other one.
I totally feel that, Will. Definitely. The chickadee is one that can really stick in your head, and that helps.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of faraway places, we had a hello from Karina in the chat. She's greeting us all the way from Panama. So lots of global folks interested in birding. How about Tati? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and any of your favorites to attract?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight and be with all these wonderful people. But yeah, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my educational background is in botany and plant ecology. And so with that background and then getting into birding 5 years ago, when I moved to Indiana for grad school and had no friends and there was no events to do, I really got into birding through the sandhill crane migration through the Midwest. And ever since then, I've just been completely obsessed. And now I basically bird for work, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, my husband and I bought our house 3 years ago, and it had the most non-native build front yard that you could ever think of. And so I made this little mission to get at least some native plants in there. And so it's a really hard journey of weeding and constantly having to take those non-native plants out. But I think my favorite plant that I have is California fuchsia because it attracts so many hummingbirds. It's easy. It's drought tolerant. I love drought tolerant plants out here in the Bay Area. And so, yeah, that's my yard story.
Awesome. All right, over to you, Brandy. Tell us a little bit about what got you into it and what you are liking to bring into your space.
Yeah. So my love for nature began when I was young, probably because of National Geographic magazines, but also because my mom and grandmother were avid gardeners. So I spent a lot of time in the garden. Gardening and botanizing, which is a word that we do use, allows you to slow down and appreciate everything around you, which I really have always enjoyed. I've never been like one of those hikers that are like, got to get to the destination. I'm like, let me just like hang out and like take in the view. And usually, if you're a botanist, you'll probably run into a few birders. And as someone who is a budding naturalist and STEM educator, you learn a thing or two from folks. So I learned that birds are like Pokemon. They have such quirky lives and all these like really diverse ways that they do things and they look, and it's like really cool. Like I guess they almost like evolve in different kind of ways. And then eventually I wanted to know more about birds, so I started looking at birds on my vacations that I went on. And I use that app, like the Merlin app, and like I love like listening to like the calls and stuff. So I feel like I'm becoming more of a birder as my life goes on, which is really cool. And basically, I've always lived in a small location. Like I lived in New York City in an apartment. So, and now in the Bay, I have like a tiny patio. So I think the way I try to, uh, I don't always get to plant the things I want to plant to get birds, but I still find ways to get them. So, in Texas, though, specifically, one of my favorite species that bring really cool birds is American beautyberry, which has these really gorgeous purple fruit. And if I'm lucky, we get cardinals, which like the family favorite bird is a cardinal because my parents are from St. Louis. So
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. And Brandy, you kind of are taking us there to one of our questions. So I'm going to go with that one first. Um, Talk about small space creating habitat, right? Is there a certain area that's like too small to make a habitat on? What kind of tips can you give our folks who have tiny spaces but want to make a difference?
yeah, that's a great question. I feel like no space is too small. I had a ledge, and that was it. I lived on the sixth floor of an apartment in Manhattan, and basically found ways to like I looked up for the right kind of bird food and mostly got pigeons. I would occasionally get some really cool like ravens, but usually just pigeons, which my cats absolutely love. I totally don't believe that cats should go outside. That's my personal hot take. So my cats stay inside and they love watching the birds come by. But on my patio, again, just finding ways to get birds to come, even if I don't have like as many plants as I want. So finding the right type of food for the right type of birds that are in your area is really important. And then also knowing how to keep the squirrels out, because this is the thing that I'm dealing with right now is the squirrels are incredibly acrobatic and they eat all the food. So birds can't like they don't have spice receptors. So if you like put chili flakes in like on like in your patio or wherever you are, squirrels don't like that stuff, and birds can totally take it. So that's a great way to keep the squirrels out and keep the birds in.
Yes, hot take. Thank you for that, Brandy. Like you probably have it in your cabinet and it can help you fight the squirrels. So shout out to that. That's awesome. I'm seeing some great questions in the chat already from Tamika and Marilyn, and I want to definitely give us a chance to zone into some of those, but some of them we're going to touch on with questions that we have arranged. So I'd love to come to one of those next. And Lindy, if you don't mind sharing with us, in your opinion, I know there's a lot of correct answers to this, but what's the best way people can improve their yard's biodiversity, meaning the differing species that are there? What's the best way they can make a difference in their yard community?
Okay, yeah, so I'm definitely not the expert, so this is just my personal experience. But pretty much, my attitude was to leave ground coverings on the ground, and that helps like beneficial insects and things like that, and also birds. They go in there and they hunt for the insects that are hiding in there, and then also I have you know I went in California. We have water issues, and so we need to have more drought tolerant landscapes. So I kind of lowered my watering and I see what survives. If something doesn't survive, I pick it out. But then I see what plants itself and grows itself. And if I like it, I keep it. So I don't know if I can just kind of walk around and show a little bit of what I'm talking about.
Go for it.
Let's see here. Yeah, this won't take too long. So I just want to also say I don't have a big backyard because this is California. I don't know if I can rotate my camera. No, I can only turn it on and off. Okay, so this is kind of like the backyard. It's the fence is right there. It's like maybe 15 feet or something like that. And then I have the house immediately behind me. But you could kind of see things just plant themselves in the yard. And sometimes they're invasive. And so I have to try and figure that out if it's invasive or not and pull it. Sometimes they're kind of plants that grow really nice. They're really nice and they just grow all by themselves. Like this bush here is totally drought tolerant. And I didn't plant it, and it's actually it's pretty big now. So yeah, and then over here I have like this. This is what I'm talking about. This tree, this manzanite tree, grew really tall. But yeah, so that's pretty much my attitude. You can kind of see over here, like the yard is neat, but in the parts where the garden part is, I just let the leaves fall and I don't sweep them away. And I notice the birds pecking in there all the time. They really like that. So I guess the other thing I have is a pond right there, and the birds will come and drink from that. So it's a very bird friendly yard, and at least in the backyard, I'm not putting out feeders or anything like that. But I don't know if you can kind of hear over my voice. There are a lot of birds tweeting around me right now. So that's kind of my attitude. Basically, see what grows. If it's not invasive, let it. And if I like it, let it. And just try to set up ground conditions so that encourages good insects and discourages weeds and stuff like that, but with the leaves that fall. So yeah.
Awesome. And yes, we can tell it works because we literally hear the birds over your head calling.
Okay.
Thanks for taking us around your backyard for that little mini tour. A couple good questions came through in the chat that were in reference to some things that we've been saying about how to know where you're supposed to find out what plants you can have in your yard, right? To know what's native, to know about your USDA zone, the plant zones. In the chat, our Black AF and STEM page and Danielle have dropped in the plant hardiness website that's part of the USDA. And then I also added in our native plant finder that I love to use from the National Wildlife Federation. Those can all tell you, based on where you're at on the map, which things are right to grow there. And you can also search it by the butterflies you want to find, by the native plants, by local places that sell these native plants. So that's a great one there. Thank you, Lindy, for taking us around a little bit. I want to keep going on this road of like which plants are good, which plants are maybe not so good, and what are kind of some of those misconceptions about them. So Tati, I am looking at you and wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about the cultural kind of landscape about weeds, right? We've heard people talking about invasive plants, native plants, weeds. First of all, tell us which ones are which ones, and then a little bit more about how that works when you're creating a native habitat.
Yeah. So yeah, my yard was a bunch of I think the previous owner had like these little wildflower seed packets, right? And they say wildflowers, so you're like, okay, perfect. I can plant these in my yard and they're going to do great. But most of them are pretty generic and probably aren't suited for your area. And so while I could have totally kept them there and they would have been fine and they provided seed for the birds, I kind of wanted to be less homogeneous. And that's kind of why I replaced it with a bunch of different native plants. But if you do have weeds in your yard, I don't think that you should be discouraged at all because weeds provide such a large resource for birds. Here in California, we have so many invasive plants. We have Italian thistle, mustard, a lot of mustard, but they all provide, nesting material, food. They attract insects, and so they attract birds. And so I think over time, as much as we want weeds or non-native plants to be completely eradicated, that's not realistic and will probably never happen. And so we kind of have to realize that there's now a relationship between birds and invasive plants. And so, yeah, your yard can have non-native, invasives, natives. I think they all kind of suit the same purpose of attracting birds, but native is always better. And as Lindy mentioned, it kind of goes both ways in attracting insect pollinators as well. And so just a subtle plug for our bumblebees, they're declining, and it's really devastating. And so if you can have this native plant that suits both purposes of attracting birds and bumblebees, you know, it's kind of like a feel-good moment, I guess. But yeah, I think that there's a misconception about weeds and that there is just a net negative for them, but we see them play such a critical role in bird survival. So yeah.
That's such a great point. And I think to kind of wrap it up too, it's like not too much of any one thing, right? Like a whole field full of just one weed, not that helpful for birds, right? But if you have a mixture of lots of things, then a lot of more animals can find out what they need and where. Here's a great link for the Xerxes Society to learn about those native bees. They are pretty much almost all friendly and great to have in your backyard. They come, they get what they need, and they go. So it's not a problem at all to have them visiting your plants. And if you see more of them, you're still safe. I always like to give that little caveat because people hear bees sometimes and get a little worried. But they are still in a lot of need, and doing something for birds is doing it for other animals too. I love that water feed you had, Lindy, as well, of just providing water. If you have nothing else to do, put out a bird bath, and you will find a lot of animals need that as well.
One other thing is that bugs is, I'm not a big bug person. I like bumblebees, and that's like the only bug that I like, but bugs equals birds in a lot of cases. And so as gross and icky they might be, they are a major food source. And so if you have good bugs, you have a lot of birds.
Listen, bugs equals birds. Put it on like my headstone or something, right? Like that's a word. Thank you for that. Okay. I want to come over to Mr. Will and tell us a little bit, because before we started this whole call, we did hear something pretty exciting happening in your yard. Would love to hear about a National Geographic type of experience you've had in your backyard. Maybe even today.
Yes. Well, what a coincidence. I did just have an amazing experience. About 15 minutes before the start of this discussion, I came into my office and my window was open, and I saw a bird flying into my backyard. And I looked a little closer, and it was a yellow-crowned night heron, which is not at all a common bird for where I live in Maine. So I like immediately was like, like I wanted to like just grab my camera and binoculars and like run outside to go and get a good look at him. But then I'm like, oh shoot, I have this thing. So I guess that it's just kind of another way that I'm reminded when it comes to birds, you really never know what you're gonna find, even when you just look out the window. So it's, I feel like, a really special type of hobby to engage with, especially when you kind of curate your space just a little bit. So if you're planting native plants that will then attract a certain type of insects that can help sustain native birds, maybe flyovers during migration will stop by and appreciate those insects that you attracted with the native plants that you cultivated in your yard as well. But I don't know. I just think it's such a fascinating type of thing to engage with, not just on a passive level. So not just me looking out the window, but I can put out an orange during springtime and maybe expect to see something like an oriole come by to my yard when I wouldn't see them if I didn't put out that type of fruit, because they usually thrive off nectar or sweet things like that. Or even just something as simple as bird seed. I wish I got pigeons. Brandy, I think you were saying you get them. I just love watching them, but I get mourning doves every now and then, and it always feels a little special because I don't see them to my deck very often. The cat loves them too. But yeah, I guess when it comes to, just to kind of wrap this thought up, something like a National Geographic moment. It's like I can get so excited to see something in my own backyard, just like I feel like I'd get excited if I was on some expedition or an international trip or looking through a National Geographic magazine. So I would encourage everybody to just always kind of be aware. If you're going to like take out the garbage or even on your commute to work, just look up and see what you could find, because you never know when you're going to have like a oh my gosh moment like I did 15 minutes ago.
Yes, that inspiration, Will. Thank you. Like it's literally that easy, just looking around. So thank you for that really important tip for us. Will, I want to keep you on for just a second because your signal is great right now, and I want to make sure we have a chance to get to this question. Can you tell us a little bit about? I know you work in zoning, right? And our native plants, sometimes they're growing a little bit bigger, larger, wider than your regular old lawn would be, right? So how can we work with like cities and governing bodies to create these wildlife friendly landscapes?
That is a great question. And I think it's a lot more nuanced than we think sometimes. For example, where I live in Maine, we have pretty heavy regulation when it comes to the land close to bodies of water. So we call it the shoreland zone. And it's heavily regulated down to the removal of any type of plant life, including invasive species. So if you want to do any work, or if you want to say take off those invasive plants to plant native ones, you're going to have to work with your local governing body and even the state sometimes. So my suggestion would be just to open a dialogue with your local municipalities, representatives, or even just city and town folks, maybe HOA members too. Because once you get to know these people, you'll realize they're just people like us, who want to make sure that their community and our community remains as thriving as it can be. So if you're passionate about something like bringing native birds back, maybe after they've been driven away by invasive species like house sparrows or starlings taking up nesting sites, or something like Japanese knotweed choking out local plants and then causing a kind of a desert for native insects and such, I would talk to them, attend a council meeting, or even something like a zoning board meeting, and get to know these folks and tell them what you care about. And then hopefully you'll be able to kind of open that dialogue in a way that is beneficial for everybody, in the sense of the steps can be taken towards mutual learning. So they can help teach you the proper ways to kind of make this change happen. And you can teach them what you're passionate about, like birding. So if I really want more policy to protect birds, and maybe that even means plant life manipulation. So if I think something like shoreline zoning is a little too strict when it comes to the removal of invasive plants that people should be able to do pretty easily, the only way change is going to happen is if you open up the dialogue. So my suggestion would be just get involved. Sometimes it's as simple as attending like a 30-minute meeting, or just shaking somebody's hand after some kind of public forum. So don't be shy. These people are hopefully doing their best for their community and your community. So yeah, if you have a free evening, try and get involved.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate the inside knowledge there. I want to go over to Brandy and Tati about plants, right? I know you guys are like the plants and the wildlife biology side. So can you talk to us a little bit? Tamika had a question earlier about like how to care for these plants. Tati, you mentioned that you're gonna have to replace some of them. Is that like by seasons? What's the care required for these native plants? And then Brandy, maybe any other tips you have for like where to start with trying to make a native plant garden, what to expect.
Yeah. So I started, I think, yeah, it's going to vary based off of where you are. I live in a pretty hot part of the Bay Area, and so it gets to, like 100, 110 in the summertime. And so I think I started mine in the late fall, so like right before our rainy season. And so then you can start there with, I went to a local native plant nursery. I think if you have any local native plant societies, they usually do plant sales, and so they can be a lot more knowledgeable about, what will do well in your yard. But like I said, I live in a hot part, and so I usually go towards the drought tolerant plants because I don't have to water them as frequently. But yeah, I kind of planted everything in the fall so that it would have, the best chance of success with all of the natural rains. And so, but yeah, I'm trying to think of, I used local native plant nurseries, and they have all of the knowledge of what grows well in your like in your zone. But I think a other good way is if you have any open spaces near you, you can kind of try to use apps like iNaturalist or Seek, Picture This, to kind of get familiar with the flora of your area. And so if you're in an open space and you're like, oh, that bird is really liking this plant, you can use those apps to be like, what is this plant? I kind of want it in my yard. And I think another good thing to increase biodiversity is to have kind of these different layers, right? Like Lindy said, having like the ground cover. I don't think that you should ever discount shrubs. I know they're not as showy as nice wildflowers, and they're a little bit more time intensive with how big they grow, but I feel like birds are the most attracted to shrubs. And then that also provides, good nesting habitat for them as well. But yeah, just have fun with it. If a plant dies, I've had many plants die. It's not a big deal. Plant something else and see what sticks.
Yeah, I feel like the native plants, they need like a little bit of babying when they first get in the ground. And then once they get their roots down, like expect in that first year, they're working on roots, right? And then in the year afterwards, you might see a lot more blooms and, size. But once they get through that portion and have a little support through those dry times, then you can get a pretty good garden going. Every year it gets better. It's my favorite thing about native plant yards. Like they improve. Unlike annuals.
Take like successional photos so you can be like, this is where I started and it did not look great. And then, 2-3 years later, it's gorgeous.
You must do glow up photos of your gardens and tag us and share, please. Freddie, any more plant knowledge you can drop on us?
Yeah, kind of going along with taking photos. One of the things my mom always did was keep a journal. Journaling is so important when it comes to, I think, anything to do with like naturalize or being like a naturalist. And I didn't realize it at the time. I was like, oh, my mom's keeping a journal. Like, I was like, I'm keeping a science journal in school. And she's over here like taking notes about what the weather was like today and how much sun she's getting and things like that. I think keeping those notes is super important because the more familiar you are with your area than the land that you're on, the more likely you know what's going on. Like, who's visiting? Is it the raccoons? Is it the local neighborhood cat? Like keeping an eye out for what's happening in your backyard or your patio or wherever is super important to sort of figuring out what is going to make a really great space for birds. The other thing I would say is that don't feel like you have to keep grass. Like, get rid of it. Especially if it's like taking up a bunch of water. Like, why? Use native plants, and also don't feel like you have to buy a bunch of plants. Make friends, get cuttings, and my mom is always trying to send me like cuttings, and I'm like, Mom, I don't have any space. But find ways to get plants and incorporate them slowly into your yard. It doesn't have to, be the perfect native garden immediately, but I think just making space for birds and little visitors, critters, bugs, anything is sort of helping the garden eventually evolve and grow. So I think that's what I would say is make friends, get rid of your grass, and keep a journal.
And I will be calling your mom after this. Send me her number so she can send me some plants. Thank you, Brittany. I'm curious. I know we've talked a lot about native and non-native and all that. I want to just take us back to basics real quick. Why are native plants the best for these wildlife habitats? What are they doing that the non-natives, the weeds or the invasives or even the ornamentals are doing that makes them so much better? Anybody who'd like to answer that?
I can take a stab at it. Something that I was thinking of as I'm just listening, is kind of the negatives of what invasives are doing. So, kind of not necessarily the positives of the natives, but it's all about competition for space and resources, at least when it comes to birds. So, people like to rail on the birds that we call invasive because they're eating up the food that the native birds would be eating or taking up the nesting spots. Kind of the same with plants. So, like I mentioned, Japanese knotweed before, it's a very prolific type of plant that kind of chokes out other plants and it takes up all the space and light and roots, spreads very deep, and is resistant to herbicide and very hard to remove. But when it is, it's taking the space that other native plants could be using that would then cultivate like native insect populations, which would then attract different types of birds. So if you aren't getting the insects that should be there in that space, you aren't getting the birds, and then you aren't getting the mammals, and it all has like a ripple effect, I think. So that's kind of where my mind was going there. So it's very important for the native plants to thrive because then they will keep the balance of the ecosystem.
That's a great way to think about it. Like our small yard or pot or whatever it is can have a bigger ecosystem effect if we're thinking about it a little more consciously. Thank you, Will, for giving us that really great summary. We're happy to have questions coming into the chat. If you didn't get yours answered, if you want to ask our panel more, we would welcome that. I'd love to go over to everybody else who's here on screen with me, though. If you have anything we want to add or like tidbits you want to make sure you tell folks about, Lindy, I'd love to come to you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. The National Geographic moment, I kind of wanted to come back to that because a few years ago, we actually had foxes come into our yard and under our porch. We were so shocked. Like, first I looked out the kitchen window and I saw something that looked like cat ears with a dog face. It was like, what is this creature? You know, I had no idea. I had never seen a fox in person before. And then I saw it. I watched it one day, and it went under the porch, and I looked under there when it was gone, and there were like two little sets of eyes looking back at me. So I found out they were gray foxes, which are kind of endangered in our area, and they were nesting right under our porch, which was pretty cool. And I was telling a neighbor about it, and the neighbor was like giving me advice about how you can soak in a rag in ammonia and throw it out, and that will get rid of the foxes. And I was like, no, I want them. They're so cute, you know? So that was kind of like, for me, a National Geographic moment. But also, we get egrets come to our pond sometimes. And because we have like little fish, like mosquito fish, they eat the mosquitoes out. And it was eating the mosquito fish out of our pond. So that was also kind of a very cool moment. We've had I've seen quail 2 times, just one coming walking through the yard, which is also like so exciting for me, California quail. So, and then also I wanted to mention another good resource, actually, our libraries, because they actually, our local library has a seed bank, and we can get seeds for free. And so a lot of them are just maybe different kind of vegetables or whatever, but also people will have native plants, seeds from native plants there. So I wanted to mention those 2 things.
I love that. That's so cool. And that it was a gray fox is even more exciting.
Yeah.
Lindy, I heard from a little bird that you have a pretty legit camera set up in your yard. Can you tell us how you're like capturing all the animals that come through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not really a setup. I got, you can get a trail cam, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can spend as much money on those as you want, but you can just, I don't have one with all the fancy features or anything like that. So it wasn't that much. It was maybe about $100. So not free, but also not, you can spend it like 500 or 1,000 on these things. So it wasn't that much. But I put it near the pond, and I was able to, just to kind of get a sense of what's visiting. A lot of the times, these birds are coming at the crack of dawn, which I'm just not going to get up. So, yeah, it's a cool way to see them, a cool way to see what's visiting when you're not there, and so on. So, yeah, it's just a trail cam, and then I get the videos off of it now and again. And it doesn't always live here. Sometimes, because I'm not too far away from trails and stuff like that, and there's ranchers not too far away. So I'll go and put it in some kind of a spot. Now you have to be careful because people will steal trail cams. Unfortunately, that happened to me. It was during the pandemic, and I was so excited to like go see my pictures, and then the camera was gone. So you do have to hide it kind of. But I've got a camera trap. They're called camera traps of a mountain lion walking past, which was very cool as well. I remember before I saw the video of the mountain lion, I wanted to see one in person. And then after seeing how big it was on the trail cam, I do not want to see one in person anymore. They're huge. So yeah. So yeah, but it's nothing fancy. It's just a trail cam.
Sure. And those are often like motion activated, right? So when an animal or something crosses in front of the camera, it'll take a series of pictures, maybe like a 10-second video, and then we'll turn off until another motion activates it.
Yeah. I have it on the video camera setting. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool finds. Some good questions in the chat about trees. This one is if you've got a tree, oh, here it is on screen. Thank you so much. If you've got a smaller yard and you can't fit one of these huge trees, any recommendations for a good smaller size tree, or how to even look up a tree by size so that you can pick the right one?
My best bet would be to, one, look for the trees that are supposed to be in your area. Sometimes people pick trees because they are pretty or they saw them somewhere else, and sometimes trees are planted in areas that they actually don't do well in. So a thing to consider is what trees do well, and do they flower or produce and produce fruit, because the flowers and the fruit will bring the birds into your backyard, and hopefully that's something that you want. Although of course with fruit comes what people call fruit mess, but you it doesn't have to be like huge oranges. It could be any type of flowering tree. So yeah, I would look for plants for birds. Yeah, that's a great resource.
Yeah, I think one of the things to pay attention to is what's called like the crown height. So kind of the max height that tree is going to get to, right, will be a good thing to look at on those pages. There are some plant finder quizzes that are linked on these sites. The Wildlife Federation has one, and Audubon. So those are good places to go as well. Lindy, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that also a lot of garden centers, people are very knowledgeable. So that's a question that I'll ask is, how tall does this tree grow? And usually the person knows. So
For sure. Tamika had a question about, oops, somebody going to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add in something to consider in for all the plants that you're looking at, is to consider how climate change is making specific growing zones very different. So specifically in Texas, like we never got frosts in Houston, or at least not as often as we're getting them now. So also pay attention to your almanac and see what they're saying about like what kind of winter you're expecting and how that may impact the type of plants you get. Because even if it says that you live in a tropical zone, now you're having to consider what the winter looks like, and you don't want to lose as many plants you put money in the plants. So just be aware of that too.
Definitely. And those trees and shrubs Nicole mentioned in the chat have a ton of value. Even if they, don't always flower or end up kind of smallish or medium sized, those are great hiding spots for birds to stay protected and make their nests. Speaking of nests, I know we always have this like constant thing of birds wanting to make nests on porches, in shrubs, in like any inconvenient spot for the people who are living in and around this space. Tamika's husband wants to trim the shrubs. There's things like a nest may be in there. How do you handle these like bird people cross points?
I have a perspective on this. So all native birds to North America are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So their nests themselves, their feathers, their eggs, their nestlings, pretty much that's all federally protected. And so if you notice a nest, it's probably good to just avoid that for a little bit. You can go on allaboutbirds.com. I think it's a Cornell site that shows you like how long they take to incubate their eggs, how long they take for the nestlings to fledge. And so once they fledge, you can trim your bushes all you want. But as long as that nest has eggs and nestlings inside of it, it's usually off limits. Nobody's going to be like checking in on it. But yeah, it's great that you're noticing that. And for example, like I do nesting bird surveys before any work is done to cut trees, to mow, to do other things. And so it's taken seriously in California and across the country. And so, but All About Birds is awesome. I love learning all the different nesting strategies of the birds and, how long they take to actually leave the nest. So I really love just kind of scrolling that site and looking up every single species that I can.
Yeah, that website is like my version of, I don't know, the mall. Like you go there to just look at one thing and all of a sudden you're there for a long time looking at all different birds. How about birdhouses? Do any of you all have experience with birdhouses? How to make them successful? When to, I know sometimes they take a little bit of time to get established. Any birdhouse tips?
I have a American kestrel bird box that I've had them nest in for 2 years so far. And that one I do have a trail cam on so that I can see. But they make bird boxes that have cameras inside of them now. They're super like technologically advanced, but I think they do take a while. I know like Western bluebird boxes, it takes a little bit of time for the birds to find them and then to like realize that they either feel comfortable nesting inside of there. But I think also paying attention to like direct sunlight to the bird boxes is really important. I know now, as Brandy mentioned, with like climate change, my familiarity with Western bluebird boxes, they have to put like shades on them now so that they don't overheat. But there's different sizes for all the species. So mine can fit kestrels and screech owls. But making little ones for wrens, I think wrens are the cutest things ever. And so I would love to have a wren box on my, like near my house. But yeah, you can like look up all of the different sizes and buy some wood from Home Depot.
For sure, you can go as DIY or as done for you with a camera in it, painted, ready to go.
Yes.
Definitely check those instructions because even the height of those boxes makes a difference too, right?
Definitely, yeah, it does.
I'm loving the questions we're getting in the chat. Thank you all so much for contributing. We've got about the last 5 minutes. So if you know anything else that you'd like to know from this crew, let us know. We'll also be keeping up with this chat if you want to continue to ask questions. And we have lots of resources on our website, blackafandstem.com. Also some really cool new activity pages if you have little ones who might want to learn about birds. There are 2 printable activity pages on our resources. And our website has the rest of the schedule for the week and all of the things you can get involved in virtually or in person, hopefully in a city near you. It looks like
I've got an anecdote about the nest boxing question too. Nest box question. Sure. I used to live in Seattle, which is a pretty urban area. And there's this big park there that they had a small contingency of wood ducks that would frequent. So some researchers and students from the University of Washington built these awesome nest boxes for them. And they put them right in the smack middle of the pond. And they noticed after a couple of years they weren't being used at all, and they're kind of confused. They're like, well, this is like the perfect dimensions and the height and all of that, but they still weren't being used. So then one of them had the bright idea to put them way back off the like standard trail into like the inaccessible area to people. So no dogs are going back there, no people theoretically should be going back there. And then that very spring, they had wood duck chicks. So they noticed that the wood ducks are a very shy species and they won't nest in open areas like that. So I guess my suggestion too, if you're interested in putting up a box and attracting certain species, try and think of some unknowns or like kind of wild card quirks about birds that could affect who would be visiting. Because sometimes it's more than just the size or the location. It's things we wouldn't consider.
Yeah, a little bit of trial and error sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
How close can the bird boxes be to your home or your front door? That is a question from Marilyn. Anybody can answer that?
I would say they can actually be pretty close. I actually had wrens nesting in a hole in the house. So I think the important thing is that maybe there's a little bit less traffic, like Will is saying. But if that's the case, if the bird can feel safe there, then they could be as close to the house as you want. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, good point. I had lots of birds pecking on my house too. One particular downy woodpecker who just refuses to give up. But yeah, I think the only thing to watch out for would be windows, right? If you have it near to a window where a bird might see its reflection and have a crash, that could be fatal for birds. So I think if you avoid right in front of windows, then you should probably be pretty safe, even if you put it close to the house. Um, Awesome. Nicole, thanks for grabbing the answer to that question for Sylvia. Sylvia was wondering about feeders that would prevent her dogs and birds from having conflict. So some of those baffled pole feeders that stop animals from going up and down, or squirrels from getting into your feeders. If you don't want to feed the squirrels, you're welcome to feed the squirrels, but just know you're going to be spending a lot of money in bird feed to feed the squirrels and the birds. Awesome. Would love to hear kind of a last word from you all here, my crew. Give us just like your last 10 seconds. You can do this, rah, rah, for our viewers, or something that they could do right now to kind of send everybody off. Maybe we could start with you, Brandy.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really helped me as someone who wasn't like taught or brought up as a birder was to sometimes if you're just outdoors, close your eyes and just listen. I find that when you're thinking and trying to look for birds, like if you don't see them, you kind of get discouraged, but actually you might hear them before you see them. And then that should help you sort of like figure out like what direction or even think about like what the calls sound like and how they differ and how many birds there might be. So I think that's just a really great exercise to consider is to just listen.
Love it. Thank you. Tati, what's your 10-second rah rah moment for us?
It would be to, if you can, just plant one native plant. It doesn't have to be, like the biggest garden in the world. Mine still has a ton of weeds in it because sometimes I'm just too lazy to pull them out, weeds. And then also to keep a list of yard birds, I think is really fun. You can kind of see, like, I put dates next to all of like my yard lifers to see like when they're coming. And to see that change. And so I'm up to 52 birds, but always trying to increase that.
Goals, Tati. Thank you. Will, how about you? Your 10-second.
Yes, I would say don't sleep on the common birds. So even if you're stuck inside on a rainy day and you've got your faithful tufted titmouse visitors or black-capped chickadees, really pay attention to them and appreciate what they're doing and how they're interacting with each other, because I think they will make you laugh and maybe surprise you. I kind of, you know, tend to glaze over them when I'm out on an expedition looking for a specific bird or things like that. But the common birds can be very fascinating.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Lindy, any last quick word from you?
Yeah, don't worry too much about what your neighbors think when you're redoing your yard to be more native and supportive of wildlife. I definitely had a neighbor across that was very English garden, perfectly portioned, and was giving me advice about how to improve my yard. Anyway, a few years later, she was in the backyard and saw all the birds flying around and was just stunned. And she was asking me for advice now. So yeah, don't worry about what other people think. Do what you want for your yard.
Thank you. Thank you, all four of you. Those were two all great messages to add. I so appreciate you all giving us your time. Thanks, Danielle, for opening us up. A reminder that tomorrow we're going to have another panel in the afternoon at 2:00. That's our theme tomorrow is Memorations of Color. It'll be a virtual sensory workshop with the Afrofuturism Collective. So be sure to tune in for that one. If you have more questions, all of our handles are here on the screen, and we'd love to hear from you online. Give these folks a follow and keep up with us there. And I'll turn it over to you, Danielle, to say anything else you might need.
Thank you so much. This was an awesome panel. I hope our viewers have walked away a little more inspired, a little more confident that they can, no matter how big or no matter how small, make impacts that are positive for our communities. That includes bugs and birds and all the things in between, and yeah, soil health. There's all kinds of stuff that are going to benefit from taking the time to tend to your garden. So thanks again, all our panelists, for attending. And if you are inspired and you are out there creating a new garden, please share with our website, with our Black AF in STEM social media. We would love to see your garden and yourself grow with these new skills. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, panelists.